Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du, fa'uzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qala Allahu ta'ala fil Qur'anil hakim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَإِن مِّن شَيْءٍ إِلَّا عِندَنَا خَزَائِنُهُ وَمَا نُنَزِّلُهُ إِلَّا بِقَدْرٍ مَّعْلُومٍ. قال الله تعالى في القرآن الحكيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إذا زلزلت الأرض زلزالها وأخرجت الأرض أثقالها وقال الإنسان ما لها يومئذ تحدث أخبارها بأن ربك أوحى لها. صدق الله العظيم. I first read a verse from chapter 15, Surah Al-Ḥijr of the Holy Quran, a short verse, which translates as follows: And there is not a thing but with us means Allah here, but with us are the treasures of it, and we do not send it down but in a known measure. And after that I recited the first 5 verses of Surah Al-Zilzāl, chapter 99 of the Holy Quran, and those verses translate as follows: When the earth is shaken with her shaking, and the earth brings forth her burdens, and man says, what has happened to her? On that day, she here means earth, on that day she will tell her news as if your Lord had revealed to her. According to the first verse which I read, everything that exists has treasures hidden within it, which are known only to Allah, and Allah discloses them to human beings in a measured way, not all at once. This verse has a number of meanings, and one of those is that it applies to humanity's scientific discoveries. Humans have discovered hidden properties in the materials around them, and as a result, they have exploited them to benefit their physical needs and their comforts and to increase their prosperity. For example, metals and minerals are found in the earth. Gradually, humans have discovered how they can exploit their properties. To take one example, less than 100 years ago, it was discovered that a mineral, a metal called uranium, which occurs of course in nature, in the earth, can be used to produce atomic energy. It was then used to build the atomic bomb, and it is also used to generate electricity in nuclear-powered generating stations. And there are numerous other metals, such as iron and copper, which are found in rocks, in other words, in the earth. Those rocks are called ore, O-R-E. And from that ore, iron ore or copper ore, man extracts and uses those metals. And again, I may say lastly that from plants and herbs which are in nature, medicines have been derived. According to the Quran, all this acquiring of knowledge by human beings only happens as ordained by God. It is not in man's control as to what he will find and how he can use it. And the history of science shows that most scientific discoveries were made by their discoverers accidentally. They were looking for one thing, but instead they found something else. And what they could use that discovered thing for, the thing which they had discovered, what they could use it for, that was not in their control. It was determined by the properties of the things that they had discovered. And it says in this verse regarding these hidden treasures, Allah says, we do not send it down but in a known measure, qadrim ma'loom. And what that means is that human beings at any time will only see certain properties in the things that they discover. Later on, they may discover further uses for the same thing. So that's what this known measure, I believe, means. The second set of verses that I read are from the beginning of a short chapter of the Holy Quran near the end, chapter 99. And it is generally considered to refer to the end of the world and the day of judgment. And if I repeat it, when the earth is shaken with her shaking, and the earth brings forth her burdens. And generally it's taken to mean that near the end of the world there will be huge earthquakes destroying everything, and then all human bodies which are buried in graves will be thrown out so that they may be raised to life and stand before God for judgment. But this doesn't seem to fit in with the next verses. The next verses are that man will then say, what has happened to the earth? Malaha, what has happened to it? And then the earth apparently will talk back to man. It says, on that day, the earth will tell her news as if your Lord had revealed to her. Now, the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, has explained that these verses refer to modern scientific discoveries and technological inventions. And when it is said that when the earth is shaken with her shaking, that means that human beings will endeavor to extract all sorts of things from the earth. And then it says that the earth brings forth her burdens, that the resources, the burdens which the earth carries will be brought out by man. Mankind will go all over the earth as well as dig down into the earth, and scientific knowledge about our physical world will be discovered extensively, and all kinds of new inventions and new industries will come into being. And this is why it says that man will say, what has happened to the earth? When people see this enormous transformation in the world due to the introduction of scientific knowledge and inventions, they will begin to wonder, what has happened to the world? How has it changed so much? And here I would add that even those scientists and inventors who produced these things originally, their new inventions, they themselves, many years later, they wondered with astonishment at the changes which their own inventions went on to bring in the world. Now the man, for example, who originally invented television in the 1920s, or the man who is said to have invented the internet in the late 1980s, they themselves would be astonished to see how their inventions later on completely changed the world. And the next verses which I read tell us that man will ask the question, as I've been saying already, what has happened to the earth? When man will ask that question, it says that on that day the earth will tell her news as if your Lord had revealed to her. Now obviously the earth cannot speak in words to human beings. This can only mean that by its very state and condition, the earth will indicate that all those new things have come about by Allah's command, as if your Lord had revealed to her. Now this is just like the Holy Quran says somewhere else about the honey bee. It says, and your Lord revealed to the bee, make hives in the mountains and in the trees and in what people build, make hives in all those places, then eat of all the fruits and walk in the ways of your Lord submissively. Chapter 16 verses 68 and 69. This doesn't mean that Allah spoke to bees actually telling them to do this. What it means is that He created bees to perform these tasks. So similarly, these words here about the earth, that it will tell man its news as if your Lord had revealed those news to the earth, they only mean that the release of the hidden treasures of the earth to man, to human beings, was a part of God's will and plan. Now, how will people know that all this was part of God's will and plan? You don't find people going around in the world saying all these new inventions are a part of God's will and plan. So, in what way will this statement of the Quran be fulfilled? That people will know it's part of God's will and plan. Hazrat Mirza Sahib says that these modern developments in communications and transport have been brought about by God in order to help to spread the call of Islam all over the world. And he says that this is just like the electric current goes in an instant from one place to the most distant corner of the earth, and it illuminates it if there's a bulb at the end. And in his day, we are talking about around the year 1900, in his day these inventions were the railway train, telegrams, which the older ones amongst us will remember using, telegrams, and the postal system, the organized postal system of delivery of letters. And Hazrat Mirza Sahib writes, in 1900, for everything there are now facilities available which your fathers and grandfathers did not have, as if this is a new world. And what he said in 1900, we can certainly make the same observation in our time as well, because the world has continued to change in the same way, in fact even faster. So we can also now say that there are now facilities available which our fathers and grandfathers did not have, as if the present world is a new world. And the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement has described the modern inventions and facilities which he could see in his time. He's described them as servants of the faith, because he says that by means of these, the true religion can be conveyed to people of the world very quickly and very extensively. Now, sad to say, in his time, when modern knowledge reached his home country of India, which was under British rule, as was a large part of the world at the time, that modern knowledge was, of course, taught in English. many Muslim religious scholars declared it to be against Islam for any Muslim to learn English, because they said this is the language of the unbelievers. And the same religious leaders also opposed the use of any new invention for religious purposes. Now, even before this time, if we go back a further 300 years, Muslims had already suffered damage by rejecting the use of the printing press for printing the Quran. Of course, later on, they came to accept it. But now, I'm talking about the late 1800s, the year 1900, now they were rejecting, for example, the use of the loudspeaker for prayers and khutbas, because they said the Holy Quran prohibits Muslims from uttering a loud voice like an ass, which the Holy Quran does say. So they rejected the loudspeaker on those grounds. They opposed photography, which had started around the middle of the 1800s. They opposed photography on the grounds, well, those grounds are well known, that Islam forbids the making of images. But you see, later on, the force of circumstances compelled them to start using all those inventions for religious purposes as well, not only for worldly purposes. And what we find today is that any latest development that comes along is at once taken up for use by Muslim religious speakers and instructors in their work. They don't raise that point anymore, that such and such a thing is against Islam. Now, when the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement allowed his photograph to be included in some of his books, his photo was published in some of his books. This was raised as an objection against him by certain Muslims who said that in Hadith there is a strict warning against the making of images of any living creatures, and you are publishing your photo. Hazrat Mirza Sahib has answered this objection in one place in a book. He says that my books also go to the West, or my writings, and that people in the West, when they read a book, they like to see a photo of the author. And he goes on to say that they have ways of assessing from someone's facial appearance if he is truthful or a liar. And in fact, in his time, in the 1800s, there were people in England, in European countries, who said they could tell from someone's facial appearance, if he was truthful or if he was telling a lie. Anyhow, he said, this is why I've allowed my photo to be published in, well, I think it was only in a few of his books. But he then goes on to say that in any case, he does not believe that there is an absolute prohibition in Islam on making pictures and photos. He points out that according to the Holy Quran, Solomon, or Suleiman as we call him, Hazrat Suleiman alayhi salam, who was a prophet and a king who had a great big empire, he says that according to the Quran, he employed what are called jinn in the Quran. And that's another subject which I won't go to. Some people interpret those jinn as being foreigners of a great stature and strength whom Solomon used for labor. Anyhow, according to the Holy Quran, these jinn made images for Solomon, whatever image he wanted to be made. And this is in chapter 34, verse 13 of the Holy Quran. And Hazrat Mirza Sahib then quotes this verse. And he also goes on to say that in nature, we find images of living things imprinted on stones underwater. And I think here what he's referring to are fossils. And you can see some of these things on seasides as well, where in stones which have been underwater, you see impressions left by living creatures which appear like images. And I've just remembered that somewhere else, Hazrat Mirza Sahib, answering this objection, has said, even in your eyes at the back, on the retina, an image is projected. So what you are seeing is, anything that you see is actually an image. And he then addresses his opponent and says, are you going to have your eyes put out? Because in your eyes there is an image of whatever you are seeing. Anyhow, then he goes on to say that modern photography has very important uses, such as it can be used to diagnose certain diseases. And then he says, there is a certain camera which can photograph all the bones in the human body. He's obviously referring to X-rays, which had only just been invented in his time. And then he writes, many branches of knowledge have benefited from photography, and some Western writers have published books containing photographs of every kind of animal and bird in the world, and this has helped the progress of knowledge. And then Hazrat Mirza Sahib goes on to put this question: can Allah, who encourages the acquiring of knowledge, forbid the use of an instrument which enables the most difficult diseases to be diagnosed? And then he goes on to add that Muslim religious leaders, by issuing such ridiculous pronouncements, give the opponents of Islam an opportunity to laugh and mock at our religion. But he goes on to say that what he doesn't like is that his photo should be published and distributed by his followers so that people can display it without any reason on their walls, just for reverence. Because he says this leads to image worship, and such displays are contrary to the teachings of Islam, and he forbade his followers from reproducing and distributing his photo, except, he says, if there is a specific and compelling need to do so, if some purpose can be served. So Muslims in general treated these modern inventions with suspicion and doubt as to whether it was allowable to use them in Islam or not. They looked at them as having been produced by unbelievers and created by a non-Islamic civilization. But you see, they could not resist their use for long, and eventually they had to adopt them. On the other hand, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad embraced them with enthusiasm and believed that these inventions were a part of Allah's plan to spread the message of truth more widely and quickly. And he once called upon leaders and scholars of the various major religions that with these means of transport and communications now so easily available and so convenient, they should get together in a meeting at one venue and present at that meeting the good points of their religions in a polite, calm and rational way, leaving aside prejudice and bigotry towards others. And he says that in this atmosphere of harmony, people will be able to see which is the true religion and what is the truth. And lastly, I will quote from him, from the same place where he's written that. He says, as God has created for us so many resources to spread the message of truth, it would be highly regrettable if we do not take advantage of these God-given blessings and we do not devise ways of using them to spread the truth, which would be spreading the truth, which would be to the great benefit of humanity. So may Allah enable us to use all the available tools that He has granted mankind in order to spread the message of Islam in the world extensively and speedily. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim wa nafa'na wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikril hakim innahu ta'ala jawadun karimun malakun barurur rahim.